So nothing was really resolved in the meeting. Everybody had a say, you know what I mean? Dick had shut a lot of mouths up when he started reading out the notes that I'd taken, the divers that we'd returned, and pointed out how much money they made from this, you know what I mean? So nobody was losing anything. It was just the fact that the Manta 4 was just like a giant bee sting for people. It was stinging people. The boat was run perfectly. The boat was clean. The boat was washed, every day, every time it came in from a trip. The hull, I got down with snorkel gear and scuba gear and scrubbed the hull on my own once every 2 weeks just to keep it clean. Cal maintained the engine. The engine was running perfectly. A big Volvo engine on the boat. It was just running perfectly. Everything was clean. It was painted. It was disinfected. All the sleeping bags. Everything. The towels. Everything that was provided for people was spotlessly clean. The inspector would come down once every couple of months and just look over the boat just to make sure that it was clean that way, and that was what was expected, and we kept it clean, and maintained, and people enjoyed it, the boat was picked up by Scuba Dive magazine, I think in '94. Somebody came down, wrote a piece on it. They took photographs of us. I didn't be bothered with the photographs, to be honest. I didn't want to get into them. But the crew was photographed. I made excuses that I had diarrhea or something, or a bad stomach or something like that. And, my name was mentioned, but, apart from that, there was not really any pictures, which is kind of how I wanted it. But everybody was happy. Everybody was happy. Tim, Amanda's ex, had started to work with us on the boat. And it was great to have Tim. Dave wanted Tim to learn the blue hole. He'd only dove it, I think, a couple of times. He started working with me and Ollie again, which was brilliant. And it was great crack having Tim on the boat. Tim was a very light-hearted, very easygoing, full of really good stories. You could tell there was tension between Cal and Tim, because apparently they'd had a fisticuff session not long before Tim had been arrested. Apparently Cal had got a few drinks in him one night downtown and threw up Cal's history, and Tim busted his teeth, and they had a bit of a roll around. They were both probably the same size. They were big boys, and Tim got the better of him and near drowned him in the sand, pushed his face into the sand apparently. And to look at Tim, who was just like Tom Selleck, Tim was very easygoing. Tim wouldn't have lost his temper very quickly, but at the same time, Tim wasn't known for taking any shit, and why should he? So, and Tim didn't care about the fact that that Cal was with Amanda. The only fact that he cared about was his daughter Rosie. He just wanted access to Rosie, and and that was it really. And that's all he wanted, was to see his daughter grow up and stuff. So that was the difference between them. Wasn't Amanda. It wasn't the fact that Cal was doing jiggy with her, or anything like that, or the hokey cokey, or whatever you want to call it. Tim just wanted to make sure that his daughter was growing up in a good environment, and that was what the most important thing to him was. Tim was happy. Tim was seeing somebody else. Tim was making money. Tim was great crack. The divers loved him. Tim was a very good looking guy, and loads of chicks, single chicks that came on the boat would hit on Tim. But Tim was very faithful to his girlfriend Tracy over on the mainland, and Tim was obviously very happy, and that's how Tim was. Very, very loyal. He was a very loyal friend. There was never any backstabbing with Tim, and there was never any little jibes, unless it was in fun. Tim would jibe you, and he would hook you like a fisherman. And if he caught you, and got you pissed off, Tim would just laugh at you, and then he'd slap you on the back, and I'm only joking, call, whatever. I would tell Tim to go show his own head up his ass, and and it was all fun. It was all really, really good fun. Tim was great with people. He was very, very easy going with people. Tim started to learn very quickly the blue hole, the history of the blue hole, and if anybody asked him, Tim was never put on the spot. And at night time, when the boat finally docked at Half Moon Key, the key line pipe came out, and the coconut rum, and and all the festivities started. A bit of music. Tim was just Tim was like David. Tim was, he was kind of like gravity, and kind of pissed Cal off, to be honest. But that's just the name of the game. And everybody was happy. So another trip ended. We pulled into the dock in San Pedro. Dave and Gary and Dick were there as usual to meet us down. There was no Amanda, there was no Tamara. Me, Tim, and Ollie unloaded the dive tanks off the boat, give the boat a bit of a wash, threw a bit of bleach on it on the deck and cleaned it down. Cal turned off the engines, handed the keys to Dave for the boat, because Cal never took those keys home. That was it. He gave the keys to Dave, signed off his paper that he'd given the keys to Dave. It was witnessed by Dick, and then it was witnessed by Gary, and that was the protocol, the way that it was. That's how David wanted it, and very military style. And everybody went their ways. We went up to the Jade Garden, and everybody sat down, had a few drinks and stuff, and telling tales about the boat and everything. And when that was over, everybody just went home. I was very, very tired. I'd started to get very, very tired, quite exhausted. I was tired of dealing with the bullshit from everybody. And I remember what David had told me once, even though I was like loving San Pedro, and David says to me, Colin, he goes, we live on an island. And I says, what do you mean, Dave? What do you mean by that, like? And he says, everything's going to close in on you one day. He says, all the bullshit. He says, all the stories, all the backstabbing, everything. He said, it's just going to come down on you one day. He says, none of us have, shoulders broad enough to carry the amount of bullshit that goes on down here. And he goes, and you'll end up feeling it one day. And I kind of shrugged it off, thinking I was invincible from all this type of stuff. And he was right. I started to feel the weight of the crap, and the childishness and the grudges that everybody had against everybody. That was starting to come down on me. And, I just was getting to the point where I felt like I was going to explode. So I headed off on my own anyway, and said goodnight to everybody. Dave gave me a hug, shook my hand, and says, I'll see you in the morning, Cole. And I headed downtown. I went downtown. It was a Friday evening. So things were going to be jumping in town. Going to be loads of bands. I did like a little circuit. My first stop downtown was to pop in and see Chris Alnett at the Blue Hole Dive Centre. I liked Chris. Chris was funny. I'd pop in and see Chris, give Chris the skinny on how the boat went, because Chris supplied Dave with divers as well, and Chris's commission was 15%. A little greedy, but Dave gave it to him because Chris supplied loads of people. He supplied loads of people around. Chris didn't have a business where he took people out. Chris had a business where he supplied people to other dive shops. Chris had a TV in the window, and he'd have little videos back then of the reef, the Blue Hole. He had the Manta 4 with us on it. He'd sent a videographer out one day to video us and stuff, and Chris promoted the island. Basically, he promoted the picnics, the Alternate trips, the catamarans, the jet skis, the fishing, the scuba diving, the snorkeling, Hole Chan, Shark Ray Alley. Chris did it all. So Chris survived on commission, and it was really good because Chris's business was flying. And I popped in and seen Chris, give Chris a skinny on the trip. He'd had sent a couple of people with us. They had gone into Chris and had just give us a blinding review of how the boat went. They were absolutely over the moon. They wanted to do some local diving with us at the Blue Hole Dive Centre. At the Belize Dive Centre. And Chris was happy. He was over the moon. So I had gone in and give Chris a skinny, and then Chris says, you're absolutely right, Cole. They've just been in with us. They're over the moon. Blah, 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 blah. Well done. Thank you so much. And I'd sit with Chris for about 20 minutes, have a Coke or a coffee with him. Then I would head down to Tarzan's nightclub. Go in and see Paul, the English guy in there, have a bit of a chin wag with him. Tarzan's was always packed, always loads of tourists and loads of people in it. I would go into Paul's private office. He had a little room just upstairs, because you walked into the bar, and downstairs was a dance floor, big lit up square dance floor with a stage at the back. And then you walked upstairs either side, and the bar was upstairs and a standing area, and then off to the side was Paul's little office. And I would go in and see Paul, and Paul would call me in, and we'd just have a chat and stuff. And Paul was a really, really super guy. Paul was a white guy who spoke with a Belizean accent. Watch your boy, what he gan, all this type of stuff. And that's how he spoke. He spoke with a Creole accent. Really cool guy.